Come on, get them in, baby. Come on.
Between AD 30 and AD 2000.
Listen to the apostate church
and
here
here's
on
what
the
they
radio.
said. Up from the AD 35 to AD 2000, there were 70 million Christians killed for their faith, of which 45 million of them were killed in the 20th century.
Those will be the ones coming back with the Lord.
In the century,
we're not going to meet
which
them.
empiricists told us was going to usher in the utopian time because science had conquered.
I put it on Facebook. Enoch
so much
talks
more
about
was
it.
known when we killed more people, one another, and out of Christians, 45 million. Do you know the present rate that Barrett and Johnston predicted is exceeding what they said? They predicted something like 100,000 Christians a year will be killed.
Oh my Lord! Look at the sun peeking out the bottom.
It was 130 to 160,000 a year. Did you know that? They're being martyred at the rate of over 200 every day.
Lord have mercy.
Which means approximately 5 a minute. Somewhere in this world, a Christian is being
the
killed
Great Tribulation
for his or her
started
faith.
for those folks?
You know,
people?
it is amazing when a rankly liberal instrument decides to cover something like that.
Has left the
and I'm
building.
looking at Newsweek magazine of February 12th. And
look at the sun coming through the bottom, True.
The famed Somalian writer who's an atheist.
Look at the sun coming through the bottom.
She actually was a former Muslim who became an atheist. If you've not read her books, you ought to pick those books up. She's brilliant in what she says. And you can't see this from a distance. My colleague Kryn and I have been in this very church where they are showing coffins lined up in a slum area outside of Cairo. When not too long ago, so many of them were just blown to bits.
Y'all need to buckle up yet. You can watch the sunset.
Auditorium, this church now carved into a
no, we're getting warm.
Memorializing these lives. And Ayan Hershey Ali, allow me to do this, please, begins her article by saying, we hear so often about Muslims as being victims of abuse in the West and combatants in the Arab Spring's fight against tyranny. But in fact, a whole different kind of war is underway.
Watch what it does to the upper high clouds.
Don't go back
Christians
over to
are
where
being
you
killed in the
Yeah,
Islamic
stay where we can see you, baby.
Right there.
It is a rising genocide that ought to provoke global alarm. She's not a Christian. And then she goes on to say this. From blasphemy laws to brutal murders to bombings to mutilations and the burning of holy sites, Christians in so many nations live in fear. In Nigeria, many have suffered all these forms of persecution. She goes on to give the statistics. In the month of January 2012 alone, Boko Haram was responsible for 54 deaths. In 2011, its members killed at least 510 people and burned down or destroyed more than 350 churches in 10 states. They used guns, gasoline, bombs, even machetes, shouting Allahu Akbar, God is great, while launching attacks on unsuspecting citizens. They have attacked churches, a Christmas Day gathering of 42 Catholics were killed, a town hall, beauty salons, and banks. They have so far focused on killing Christian clerics, politicians, students, policemen, and soldiers, as well as Muslim clerics who condemned their mayhem. While they started out by using crude materials like hit-and-run assassinations from the back of motorbikes in 2009, the latest Associated Poll reports indicate that the group's recent attacks show a new level of potency and sophistication. And if I remember, her last paragraph was quite worth reading. Instead of falling for overblown tales of Western Islamophobia, let's take a real stand against the Christophobia infecting the Muslim world today. Tolerance is for everyone except the intolerant. Pretty tough language for Newsweek. You know, in the early days of my ministry, I was doing work in Vietnam and Cambodia and all of that during the war. And in 1974, I stopped by in Bangkok for one night en route to Phnom Penh. And they gave me a layover because there was no flight available that night. It was in the days where airlines were kind to you, and you did sit down and enjoy a nice feeling that you were needed. And so they would put you up in a hotel overnight. And as I was walking out of there, one of my friends standing at the door, greeted me. I was shocked. He was a classmate of mine named Koz Fiji. He was about a 6'5" tall, lanky Dutchman. He and I did our undergraduate in theology together in Toronto. I said, Coase, what are you doing here? He said, you thought you'd go through without letting me know, didn't you? Well, somebody had let him know. I had a hotel room given for the night. We had two twin beds there. I lay on my bed, he lay on his. He put his hands behind his back and through the night talked to me about his fears. And one of his fears was that he would pay with his life someday. I said, Coase, don't talk like this, you know. It's a peaceful setting here. You'll be okay. He said, no, my friend. He said, things happen here very suddenly. I won't go into details. Time has run out. But I think it was in 1981 or so. I remember getting a letter with a white envelope and a black border from Overseas Missionary Fellowship, YMF. When I opened it, there was a picture of Coase and a border in memoriam. He was speaking at a church in a little town, and he'd finished speaking. He was a very strong man physically, but even stronger in his convictions. As he walked, actually it was a prayer meeting, and as he was walking to a prayer meeting, a man waiting for him with a gun, point blank, 7 bullets into his face and killed him. You know, for the first time it hit me that I would sit in class next to a martyr in the making. And things don't change very much. History is replete with that. Scorn, force, and lastly, scheming. I'll only take a minute to talk about this. You know, you can take a lot of challenges. You can take a lot of attacks. And I face it all the time. I get used to it. Many of the hate. Toss it in. I remember critiquing or commenting on the book not too long ago, written by a famous person here on why he was not sure if hell existed at all. And the book was called Love Wins. So I critiqued it and wrote, and somebody wrote me a totally angry letter for disagreeing with the book. I was so tempted to write back, dear friend, evidently love does not win. The kind of stuff you get in the mail. I tell you what, none of my teammates have been spared. You get this guy. We get used to the flack from those on the other side of it when you get shot at from the back.
I hope the camera is really picking that up. That is gorgeous.
You know, one of the former Atlanta Falcons kickers, Jason Elam, once told me, he said, you know what, Ravi? You expect to be booed on the opponent's turf. When you're booed on your own turf, it's very hard to take. The scheming that goes on. Shemaiah and Noadiah tried to trap Nehemiah and set him up so that they could destroy him. They didn't succeed. You've got scorn, you've got force, you've got scheming. Nehemiah responded with 3 ways, and I'll just have a brief amount of time to talk about it. Number 1, he said, you have to look to God. Sounds simple?
Early this morning.
Yes. Is it profound? Absolutely. You know, prayer, said Augustine, is an all-sufficient panoply, a mind which is never diminished, a sky unobscured by the clouds, a heaven unruffled by the storm. It is the root, the fount, and the mother of 1,000 blessings. How it has repelled frauds, rescued cities from destruction, arrested the progress of the thunderbolt, and he goes on and on and on. He would never have said it had he not experienced it. There are times in life when all may turn away, and your only hope will be on your knees, to look to the heavens and to call upon God. When Elisha was surrounded by the Arameans, outnumbered, his servant came and he said, Master, we are finished. And Elisha said, Lord, open his eyes. Let him see the chariots of fire that you have sent to bring and to protect us. I want you to know there are times in your life where you have been protected by those unseen chariots of fire, those who have guarded you and will guard you and take you through. If you're going through that time in your life right now, look to him. The answer may never be instant, but if you continue to look to him, I guarantee you someday you will find out in that old story of the footprints that there were times where there was only one set of footprints because you were being carried in his arms. I've seen it, I've experienced it time and time again. In 1971, when I was in my mid-20s and in Vietnam, I remember the missionaries all left there and everybody was gone. Till this day, I often think about that because they left me in a high school in Dalat. Everybody was gone. Do you know what it is like to live in a war-torn country in one room with scores of other rooms and the whole building in darkness, and you're sleeping alone at night for about 5 days, where every little sound, especially when you know some missionaries right in that building had been attacked and threatened, and I think in some of those in that, certainly in that area, had been killed. And I remember in my mid-20s just saying, Lord, I have no bars. I'm not even sure these locks really work. I'm all alone here, and you're the only one I have. And I want you to protect me and take care of me. And you go to bed at night feeling your own heart beating like that because you're in a place where nobody would ever know if anything happened to you. Look to God.
I know, I need a
Trust
tripod.
in Him. The Candle and the Bird is an essay written by one of my favorite writers, F.W. Borum. And he reminds us of how through the history of revivals God moved. First in England, Milton and all of those at his time, Bunyan around that time, the Puritans, Milton writing Paradise Lost and Bunyan writing Pilgrim's Progress. Gradually that died out, and next thing you see a group of young people are meeting in Herrenhut, Germany, at a prayer meeting led by a man called Count Zinzendorf, and his impact became so great that a young Charles Wesley's heart was strangely warmed as he read of the Moravian efforts spawned by this Herrenhut prayer meeting, and he carried that with him all his life. In fact, the day the cross was being burned in Paris at Notre Dame, it was William Carey who was setting his foot on the soil in India on that very day with the Bible and the Moravian Missions Manual in his arm, and he was going to make an impact in India almost unparalleled. But as it was dying out in England, then gradually it moved to Scotland, and there was Bonar and Alexander Duff and Robert Murray McShane. They carried it. As that was dying out again, Charles Spurgeon's voice thundered through England, but not before they had sent some of the best of them to the United States, and the Second Evangelical Awakening came. Why does he call his essay The Candle and the Bird? He said, you know, if you put a candle out, the light is gone. If you frighten a bird, it'll go and sing its song on another bough. England, Germany, Scotland, Wales, back to England, now, then in America. Do you know where the fastest growing church in the world is today? It's in China.
It's in our hearts.
The very place where Mao Zedong said Christianity was finished.
Bye-bye.
Look to God. Number two, quickly reflect on the issues. And I say to you, what is at stake if you stop fighting for Christ?
Wow.
Your
Pretty
home,
cool, huh?
your family, your society, your community, your city, your nation. That's what Nehemiah said to them. Be ready for this. Look to God.
Oh, you funny little girl. My ocean breeze. Hey there.
When we desacralize everything, what's at stake? And lastly, he
There's
says,
mommy, there it goes, and there's true.
and I want to close for you.
And there's my breeze. I'm going to stop now so that people don't get crazy bored watching. God bless y'all. We are the love family.
Do you know how to answer the questions of skeptics?
We are powerful
You know where to
for
send
the
the
Lord
skeptics when you're
YAHSHUA.
asking those questions?
Can't touch that.
You know, the skepticism of youth is very high today.